Hi, my name is Katya Stepanov. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am a co-founder of the Inheritance Project. I was actually born with a different name. My name was Yekaterina Olegovna Stepanova. I was born in Minsk, Belarus, 4 days after the Soviet Union fell apart. And I immigrated to New Jersey when I was a really young child. I was 1 year and 1 month old. And it's here in America that all my family's names got changed. And so I became Katya Stepanov. And I grew up in New Jersey and went to school in Pittsburgh. And now I live in Brooklyn, New York. So my first form of ID when we immigrated to the United States said resident alien. And that is exactly how I felt. I grew up navigating two completely contradictory cultural worldviews. One was the worldview in my house, which was an environment of post-Soviet confusion. To my parents' credit, they were immigrants, didn't speak any English. None of us spoke English. English wasn't my first language. So we felt like strangers in a strange land, aliens trying to navigate a culture that was totally different from our own. And so because English wasn't my first language, because I felt really out of place, I learned how to perceive the world on an emotional level. I started to really watch people and try to understand what were these people really saying. And what I observed as a kid is that people say one thing, but they actually mean something totally different. They might be saying something and then their body is saying something completely different. And so I learned really young to pick up on these cues. And I became really fascinated with people and human behavior and how people told stories about who they were, about the world that they live in. I just became obsessed with storytelling. I was really fortunate that my parents picked up on this and they brought me to dance class. So my very first experience with storytelling was being a professional Latin ballroom dancer. And I danced from the age of 3 to 13. And then I quit dancing because I realized that I wanted to do more. I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to use my voice. I wanted to tell stories with my whole body. And that's how I fell in love with acting. I started acting in musicals. I graduated from high school and I made a deal with my parents that if I got into one of the top conservatories in the United States, that they would agree to let me go. And that journey was the greatest gift that I gave myself and that my parents gave me to support me going to Carnegie Mellon University, because there is the first place that I ever felt like I belonged. And coming to a conservatory program, it allowed me to practice and be fascinated by human behavior in a way that I was not really allowed to be fascinated with humans in a normal school system. So that was my first time that I really felt like, these were my people, this was my community. I was surrounded by people from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, but we were all connected by this desire to understand humans and understand why they do the things they do. Why do they talk the way they talk? Why do they see the world the way that they see the world? So this was a really formative experience for me going to acting school. And that was the first time that I started to grapple with the fact that I do have a unique inheritance. And I started to see the way in which my household and my upbringing and my inheritance set me apart and made me different from a lot of the other people that I was in school with. I started to understand that something that was really obvious to me was this invisible element of inheritance, of how you're formed as a human being. What beliefs you inherit from your parents, the beliefs you inherit from your unique cultural groups. For me, it was Latin ballroom dance and the post-Soviet immigrant community and theater, right? And how all these different cultural groups shaped who I was and who I thought I was and the story of who I am. And I was really lucky because I got to study a craft that really integrates the mind and the body. And I got to learn how to be a really good storyteller. And by learning how to be a really good storyteller, I also got the opportunity to really investigate my story of self. And I understood that this is a privilege, that I believe every single person should have. I believe every single individual should have the opportunity to go into their story and say, why is this the story of who I am? I felt like I had this box, this Pandora's box inside me of my family's history in the Soviet Union, my Judaism. My mom is Jewish and my dad is Russian Orthodox. And so both of those lineages have a great deal of history and trauma and all these different things that I felt lived inside me, but I didn't know how to process it or what to do with it or, how to transform it. And that's what got me really interested in creating a process for this, creating a methodology to guide people to open the box, look inside the box without shame and without fear, and actually start to sort out what's in that box so that instead of just passing it on to future generations, we could consciously choose what we want to leave in our legacy. So after I graduated from college, I moved to New York City. And I really pursued my dream of being an actor. And I traveled all over the country. So my experience of navigating many cultures was expanded. And I started to meet people who were really different from me, who had completely different ideas and opinions. And I started to understand that my skills as a storyteller, my ability to hold space, my ability to really get curious and ask people questions, my desire to really understand who people are instead of making assumptions or stereotypes or generalizations about them. I started to realize that all of these storytelling skills were also facilitation skills. In parallel with this, because I was living out of a suitcase and I had no home, I was traveling city to city, show to show, I needed a practice to really ground me in my own nervous system. I needed something I could return to. And it's that need for some sort of practice that drew me to mindfulness meditation, yoga, and somatic work, and understanding how to work with the body. And that practice, going to yoga, starting to meditate, going down this path of somatics, really led me to start to process that inheritance that I was carrying inside. And so I trained to be a professional yoga teacher, and I started teaching yoga. And then I had the opportunity to become a team building facilitator. And so I combined all of my skills, all the acting skills that I learned, the voice and speech skills, the space holding skills, and started to design interactive and immersive scavenger hunts for teams all over the United States. And my experience as a team building facilitator made me understand that there was an actual application for exercises and activities that bond people to each other, and that this was really effective in order to get groups to collaborate better together. And that's when I started to have this light bulb moment. I thought, I'm really interested in storytelling. I understand that inheritance is something that people don't have an opportunity to navigate and unpack and connect over. And I learned all of the skills I needed to produce events for teams in companies all over the United States. And so the dream started to take shape of Inheritance Project, that we could create a methodology and a way of guiding people through an experience of understanding their story of self, their inheritance, what makes them who they are, and sharing it with each other in a really unique and different way in order to strengthen the bonds between all the people that work on a team or, are maybe in all different places around the country. And when you do that and you start to actually give people a framework to understand who they are and communicate that to each other in a work setting, there's something really deep and meaningful that takes shape. And people start to trust each other and start to be seen for who they really are, rather than the ideas that we all have about each other before we have an opportunity to really tell each other our story. I believe that this work allows us to see ourselves, maybe for the first time, in all of the different aspects of who we are, without having to reduce ourselves to one identity or one category or one profession or one hobby. And we live in a world where reducing our identity is really, really common and incentivized. And so I started to understand that this is really pervasive. We see this all across society, how we can just reduce who we are into one category so that we can have an illusion of belonging, when that's not really belonging at all. And what belonging really is I'm allowed to tell the story of who I am, and I'm allowed to be complex, and I'm allowed to not fit in a box. And when you create that environment for people where no one is trying to fit in a box and everyone's actually trying to understand all the contradicting, confusing, conflicting parts of what makes us who we are, that's where real connection happens. That's where healing happens.